Welcome to the Live From Rest podcast, episode 14, in which we look at the place of forgiveness in relation to living from rest. I'm Steve Smith, your host and the author of the Live From Rest app. Each week in this podcast, we take time to explore the ancient art of being. We host conversations, short talks and reflections about how we can live from rest in a world full of busyness and distraction. This is the third of 3 podcasts that I've been doing with my wife Lucinda. We're in France. We've just had a lovely 2 weeks holiday with our Labrador dog Rosie.
We have, yes.
So we thought it would be good to have a chat about forgiveness. Forgiveness is really a very difficult subject for so many people, but it's one that we really think needs to be faced because so much freedom is attached to it. And Lucinda, you've done quite a few talks, haven't you, in relation to rest, and forgiveness is one of them. So I thought maybe you could start by sharing some of your thoughts on the whole subject.
Yes, I'd love to. I think that having unforgiveness in your life, put it that way, is a hindrance to real rest.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's partly why I'm interested in talking about it here. In the same way that, as we discussed 2 weeks ago, grumbling and moaning and mumbling away to ourselves without offering that to God and talking it through with Him can be a hindrance to rest. I believe unforgiveness or lack of forgiveness can be a hindrance to rest.
Definitely.
And the main issue, the main reason that is so, is that forgiveness is a spiritual issue.
Mm-hmm.
And it is primarily an issue between me and God, not between me and the person who hurt me. So we tend to think forgiveness or unforgiveness is it's between me and that person.
Mm-hmm.
And it's my choice. If I don't want to forgive them, I'm not going to forgive them. But actually, the Bible doesn't say that. The Bible makes it quite clear that forgiveness or unforgiveness is a spiritual issue. And it works across the world, across cultures, across religions. It doesn't matter who you are, what you believe. The principles of forgiveness stand. And the main one is that if we refuse to forgive, we are living with, if you like, a fish hook in our hearts. That's a picture that Freedom in Christ ministry uses, and I think it's a very good one. There's like a fish hook in our hearts, and a lot of the time it's fine, it just sits there. But then, you know, we hear a piece of music, we meet somebody who's got the same name as the person who hurt us, we go to somewhere where we went with that person, we smell something and the fish hook yanks, and that wound has no chance to heal. People think that when we forgive the one who hurt us, we are letting them off the hook. But I need to tell you that they aren't on the hook. They are not on the hook. They're on a cruise in the Mediterranean and they have completely forgotten about what they did to you, what they said to you, how they treated you. We are the ones living with the hook. We're on the end of the hook.
Yep.
And so forgiveness is letting ourselves off the hook. It's giving that wound a chance to heal. It is a spiritual issue, and as long as that hook is twisted into our hearts, our relationship with God will be hindered. It will absolutely be hindered. We may not realize that because we haven't experienced real freedom, because that hook's in our heart. But you take that hook out and you forgive the person who hurt you and you release them, and you will know a greater sense of freedom and a greater sense of connection, I believe, with God. So I think this is the number one thing about forgiveness that we all struggle with. If I forgive, I'm saying that it doesn't matter what they did to me. But I'm saying to you that is not the case. It matters very much. It matters very much to God what that person did to you. And he will not let them off his hook. He will sort them out. They will have to stand before him and give an account. But what God's concerned about is you.
Yeah.
He wants you to rest, to be free, to know joy and peace. And while you've got that fish hook deep into your heart, you've got a massive wound that will not heal until you choose to remove it.
Sure. Yeah, and it's a hard thing to do, but it's so liberating. And the converse of not forgiving is being tortured, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And that's the phrase that Jesus uses in Matthew chapter 18. Really encourage you. I'm sure most of you will know the parable of the unforgiving servant. If you haven't read it, turn to Matthew 18, Sinners Will Be Finished, and read it. So Jesus in that parable makes it really clear that our freedom is linked up with forgiving.
Yeah, and as long as we don't, we are, as it were, handed over to the torturers. And we are tortured to a lesser or greater extent.
Yeah.
Some people are very tortured.
Definitely.
By what's happened to them. They become really quite bitter. And that's a tragedy.
Sure.
For Christians. We're talking about Christians. And others don't necessarily become bitter, but there's a part of them that's become hard and a bit calloused, and that gets in the way of a lovely connection with God. So
sure,
there are consequences.
Yeah, I'm quite clear in my mind that the act of forgiveness has got a lot to do with our mental health, and that a lot of bad mental health is perpetuated basically by bitterness, unforgiveness. Something that I've often recommended to patients that I've seen in drug addiction clinics. I've seen many people who've really suffered, and that includes people who've been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress. And I've encouraged them to watch a movie, and I'll encourage you all to watch it if you haven't seen it already. It's called The Railway Man. It stars Colin Firth and Nicole Kidman, and it's about a man who was brutally tortured by the Japanese in World War II as a prisoner of war, and he clearly suffers with post-traumatic stress disorder. You see him in the film having horrible flashbacks, nightmares, and problems in his relationships. And he has the opportunity, and this is a totally true story, of going to Thailand to kill one of his abusers who happens to be working in Thailand in a museum. He goes out with the intention of getting revenge. Thankfully, they somehow reconcile. And that reconciliation was a key factor in this man. His name was Eric Lomax. You can look him up. A key factor in his recovery was reconciliation with his abuser. And again, that wasn't to say that what happened was okay, but the film reports him as saying that at some point, the hating has to stop. And Patty, Eric Lomax's wife, she documents somewhere that the nightmares slowly began to cease after that act of reconciliation. So it's not necessarily a case of something that Christians have to do. It's as you said, it's a spiritual law, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And it's a choice we have to make.
Yeah.
And actually, to be really honest, God doesn't really give us the option of not making this choice.
No.
If we want him to forgive us, then we have to forgive our fellow men and women who've hurt us.
Yeah.
And often we don't want to, often we don't feel like we want to, but it's nothing to do with feelings, it's nothing to do with wanting. It's a choice that we make. So it's a choice that we make sometimes through gritted teeth. Sometimes we have to make it over and over again. We have to forgive over and over again until finally one day we can remember that person and there's no feeling attached, no emotion attached to that person.
That memory.
That memory. And we're free. So it's a choice we have to make.
Yeah, it's a bit like love, isn't it? Love is a choice, and so often I think we're led to believe that love is a feeling, and of course love has a feeling. Of course, feelings can be attached to love, but primarily love is a choice. We choose to love regardless of how we feel, and in the same way we can choose to forgive, can't we?
Yeah.
in the light of what you were just saying, I'm just reminded of a teaching I once heard that was very impressive, I thought. And the choice that we have is between mercy and judgment. Very often we want mercy for ourselves and judgment for the other person. And God doesn't actually give us that option. He gives us one of two options, and that's mercy for you. And then if you want mercy for yourself, you have to be merciful to others. Or if you want judgment for the other person, then you're putting yourself in the place of receiving judgment. And that's hard, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's a spiritual law. It's a good spiritual law. And if we can learn to be merciful, then we're well placed to receive mercy, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely. We are. And it's difficult. We're not saying it's easy. It's by no means easy. You know, some of us have suffered deeply. We're not saying this is easy, but we're just encouraging you to do this, to begin this process of forgiving those who have hurt you, whether the hurt is small or really big, and to keep short accounts on a day-to-day basis. Just forgive people, live generously with your forgiveness. And
we found, haven't we, that and it applies very much to sort of helping people with healing, inner healing, that sometimes actually forgiving small things can be a real key to freedom, can't they? And sometimes, you know, it may be forgiving a parent for something he or she said to us, which may seem to be fairly innocuous, but it's actually had an impact on the way we are and the way we think. And you've had that experience, haven't you, with people you've been helping?
Yes, and sometimes the person that's the hardest to forgive is ourselves, because we have made unwise choices, and we hold ourselves in a place of unforgiveness. We won't forgive ourselves, but that's like saying that the cross is not enough, and we can't do that. You know, Jesus took the punishment that was ours for those wrong choices, for the silly things that we've done. And he releases us. And so we have to release ourselves. We have to forgive ourselves and take the hook out of our own hearts.
Absolutely. We've been discussing that forgiveness is not an easy thing to do. One of the things that can make it easier, maybe, is to pray. To pray for the person that has hurt you. Jesus encourages us in Matthew 5:44. Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. And we heard a great talk, didn't we, by John Bevere called The Bait of Satan. And I think it's a book as well. And John Bevere recounts an example of a great difficulty he had. Somebody had really hurt him. The freedom that John Bevere experienced really came out of praying for that person, didn't it?
Yeah.
So pray for those that you're trying to forgive. And another suggestion is to write a letter, and sometimes write a letter and send the letter, because that may be the thing that needs to be done. Sometimes the opportunity to send the letter may be over. Maybe it's inappropriate to let somebody know that you've forgiven them when they didn't even know they'd hurt you in the first place. Maybe somebody's died that you need to forgive. And the act of writing a letter and actually vocalizing words of forgiveness, I know that has been really helpful for very many people. So that's another practice that you might like to consider.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. The thing is to do it, isn't it? And not to put it off, and nor to pray, oh God, help me, because it's not that he won't help you. He has just told us to get on and do it. You know, he says, forgive those who have sinned against you. Yeah. It's a commandment. So we just need to do it. Absolutely.
Well, there's something to ponder, to consider. Forgiveness, without a doubt, it's a key to good mental health and freedom and rest. So we encourage you to consider it very seriously. We'll probably revisit this at some point because it's such an important subject. Thank you so much for joining us today. We love doing these podcasts, and we really hope you're enjoying them. If you are enjoying them, please do rate us or share us on social media. And if you haven't done so already, please do download our app, Live from Rest, available from the Apple App Store and Google Play Store. Find meditation rooted in the way of Jesus. Thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to being with you next week. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.